Cheating doesn't start in bed. Cheating starts with messages. I noticed that my husband, who is 10 years younger, began to disappear in the shower for a long time. For the first time in a long time, he set a password on his phone and began to monitor himself. Always a perfect hairstyle and beard, washed and ironed clothes. I don't remember him like this even when we started dating. I felt that someone else had appeared in his life. I tried to talk to him about it, but Steven denied everything. And one day I noticed a white hair on my comb. Not mine, not Steven's. I was cold at the thought that she was in our house. Then I did an experiment that I will regret for the rest of my life. I pretended to be going on a business trip, set up a camera in the bedroom and in the kitchen. It took her an hour to come to my house with a suitcase. I'm Lauren, yes, that Lauren your cousin warned you about at Thanksgiving. The one who works too much and expects too much. I'm 58, which means I'm old enough to read the whole menu before ordering and young enough to throw it at you if you try to order for me. I learned that from experience, twice. And because this story insists on beginnings, let me give you mine. I lost my first husband the day I opened a linen closet and found my best friend's scarf folded around his cologne bottle like a ribbon on a bomb. The rest of that scene plays out in my head even now. Her lipstick on my teacups. His explanation that sounded like a job interview. My hands very steady as I set my wedding ring on the counter and took the dinner rolls out of the oven so they wouldn't burn. I don't cry when I'm betrayed. I preheat to 425 and write a list. After that, I didn't date for years. I built a career. I traveled for board meetings and brought back little hotel soaps I never used. I learned how to ask for a raise without swallowing my tongue. I taught myself to sleep diagonally and take up all the space. Then, because life loves a plot twist, I met Steven on a plane. He was reading a dog-eared paperback on astrophysics, which is not my genre, but I respect a man who wrestles with stars. I was in a navy blazer with an apology smile I save for gay agents. He asked, "Are you Lauren?" Like my name had been waiting in his mouth for years. 2 months later, he knelt in a garden behind a tiny restaurant and proposed with a ring my daughter would later call suspiciously perfect. We had a quiet wedding, just the kind where your friends toast you and your enemies pretend they're thrilled. He was 10 years younger, and for a while I didn't mind how people eyed us like I'd stolen a sports car from the dealership and was still circling the block. He didn't deprive me of attention. Flowers, gifts, those text messages that arrive like small fireworks when you're in a long meeting. He had a way of saying "I see you" that made the room warmer. "Mom, he only wants money from you," my daughter said once, wearing that look adult children reserve for parents who have the nerve to be human. I laughed her off. He wasn't poor. In fact, he had a respectable consulting business, the kind that came with soft leather briefcases and clients who wore shoes with quiet soles. But somehow we mostly lived on my money. My savings melted for dinners, trips, the sort of investments in us that look a lot like handbags and weekend cabanas. Love can be generous. It doesn't have to be blind, but mine were smudged mascara. Then the message arrived. One evening my phone bloomed with an unknown number. "He will still be mine. You have to stop loving him and let him go." I showed it to Steven. He laughed, kissed my temple, called it a mistake, and helped me block the number like a dutiful ID department. We watched a movie that night about a woman who refused to see what was in front of her. Irony loves me almost as much as men with soft leather briefcases. A month later, he started showering long enough to grow gills. New cologne, phone face down even when it buzzed. An invisible velvet rope grew around him. When I tried to talk to him, he folded me into a hug and told me I was overthinking. That's the thing about gaslighting. It doesn't feel like fire. It feels like a warm bath. The earring appeared on a Tuesday, gold, cheap, the kind that comes in a bubble pack with 6 other lies. I found it near the sofa, twinkling like it belonged to the house and not a body. Steven said we must have brought it in on our shoes. His face didn't flinch, but his pupils did. Then there was the hair white, not mine, not his, caught in the teeth of my comb like a flag stabbed into conquered land. A woman knows. We're born with an internal seismograph that registers tremors long before things fall off shelves. The old me would have checked his phone, studied his calendar, sniffed shirts. The new me is a project manager with a taste for theater. I remembered something my mother used to say while shelling peas: "If he's choosing between you and someone else, set down the bowl. Let him choose. Just don't be there when he looks back." So I engineered absence. I told Steven I had a week-long training out of state, kissed him at the door, hauled my suitcase to the car, and drove not to the airport but to a quiet hotel 30 miles away where the staff still called you dear and the ice machine sang like a choir. The night before, I had placed a pair of discreet cameras in the bedroom and kitchen, tiny black commas in our domestic sentence. If you think that's cold, remember, I learned to be precise from men who thought I wasn't paying attention. An hour after I left, the front door opened and she came in with a suitcase. Not just any she, my sister, Madeline. Do you know that sound you hear in a dream when something terrible happens? Like a piano dropped down a stairwell very far away? That was in my ears as I watched Maddie slip off her shoes like she'd done it 100 times. She poured herself a glass of my wine with the confidence of someone who co-owns it. Stephen met her in the kitchen, and the way his hand cupped the back of her neck told me the whole story in 3 fingers. I turned the hotel AC to freezing and stared at the screen. I thought of the last conversation I'd had with Maddie. She'd borrowed my coat for an event, never returned it, swore she had. That coat was probably draped over a chair in my house while she applied lipstick in my mirror. The anger came hot, then sharper, then very, very useful. I breathed through it and took notes. Cameras are good for catching people. They're not good for teaching them anything. And I am, above all, a teacher when provoked. First, the pop-in. An hour after Maddie arrived, I drove home like I'd forgotten my passport, because a little theater never hurt anyone except the guilty. I let myself in humming, a neat black folder in my hand. Stephen was on the couch, shirt half buttoned, a bead of sweat shining like a confession. He jumped to his feet so fast he nearly left his soul behind. "Oh, honey," I said, "I forgot my passport." Silly me. I walked toward the bedroom, and he did a little panic dance, blocking, smiling, a marionette pulled by strings of fear. "Baby, you look flushed," I added kindly. "Fever? You should lie down." Maddie was in the closet. I could feel her presence like heat behind a wall. The suitcase, hers, a smart little number with stickers from places I paid for, was barely hidden under the bed. Stephen was shaking, the way a guilty man shakes when the ghost of consequences brushes his cheek. I pressed my hand to his forehead. "Burning up," I diagnosed. "Why don't you rest? I'll be out of your hair in a second." I stepped into the bedroom, reached into the dresser for a spare passport sleeve slowly, deliberately, and let my gaze drift to the closet door just long enough to paint it with terror. The air in there was probably oxygen and regret. Then I left, kissed him on the cheek, whispered, "Hydrate," and took my folder and my performance back to the hotel like a woman who knows the next act is going to be excellent. That night, the cameras showed me everything. Maddie in my robe, pretending Satin erases shame. Stephen making love to her on my kitchen counter, where I roll out pie crusts and tax strategies. They laugh the way people laugh when they think the universe adores them. I watched until my hands stopped shaking. Then I opened my laptop and did what anyone with a broken heart and a healthy imagination would do. I hired a haunted house. Stephen is terrified of ghosts and aliens. He used to flip the porch light on twice before coming to bed because he said, "You never know who's visiting." I know exactly who's visiting, I thought, and I know how to make them leave. I found a local prank company called Scare Me to Death. Their testimonials were full of bachelorette parties and overgrown frat boys, but I called anyway. "I need something elegant," I told the woman on the phone. "Something that tastes like justice with a hint of science fiction." There was a pause, then a professional sort of joy in her voice. "Ma'am, you are speaking our language. We planned the show like a heist. 2 actors, one pale as moonlight with contact lenses that reflected light, the other in a shimmering suit with LEDs that stuttered like a UFO's heartbeat, a fog machine that rolled in low and cold, hidden speakers under the porch that would leak whispers of static and distant voices. And because I'm a generous director, a sequence of gentle knocks around the house attic, then pantry, then the closet where my sister liked to become a pair of legs. I gave them the keys. I gave them the schedule, Stephen's gym, Maddie's habit of never showing up on time for shame. I gave them the brief. Nothing violent, nothing cruel, just enough to pull the floor out from under their little paradise and let them feel the drop. Meanwhile, I built my ambush. I printed stills from the cameras, Maddie's hand on Stephen's chest, his mouth at her throat in my kitchen light. I tucked the photos into a manila folder labeled inventory because petty details make me happy, and I dragged a rusted steel barrel from behind the shed to the middle of the yard. Our neighborhood association prefers shrubs to statements. I prefer statements. Here's what people forget about betrayal. It teaches you logistics. It makes you careful with timing, generous with bait, ruthless with exits. I had exits mapped, down to the sidewalk where the lawn meets the streetlight, because I wanted them to be backlit when they ran figures in a cautionary tale I'd tell myself whenever I watered the hydrangeas. The night before the show, my son texted, "Hey mom, quick thing, can I borrow $5,000 till Friday?" He's 30, a perfectly competent adult who's learned to treat me like a debit card that sometimes answers the phone. It was the 4th time this year. He never paid it back. I stared at the text until the words blurred, then typed, "No try Friday without it." He sent 3 question marks, then a thumbs down, the millennial equivalent of a door slam. My heart pinched, not because of the money, but because how did I raise men who thought I was a vending machine? I put the phone face down. There are some debts you stop paying for your own health. By dawn, I'd memorize the plan. By noon, I'd rehearse my expression for when they sprinted out onto the lawn in their underwear, compassionate, steady, the kind of face a woman wears when she's finally done apologizing for asking to be respected. I pressed a match into the lid of the barrel and watched it take. Sometimes closure requires fire. Sometimes it just requires a camera and a sense of humor. At dusk, I stood in my doorway, keys in one hand, manila folder in the other. The yard was very quiet, the way yards get in the hour before drama. From the kitchen camera, I watched Stephen and Maddie open a bottle of wine and clink glasses like they'd invented romance. The actors were in position. The fog machine was primed. The porch light flicked twice on its own, and then because my mother raised me to pray before both meals and battles, I murmured, "Let them learn." The attic knock came first, a soft, deliberate tapping that travels down the bones. Stephen froze. Maddie rolled her eyes and poured more wine. The pantry knock answered, closer, like footsteps taking a stair. Then the lights pulsed. A low hum crept under the floorboards, a sound like the sky clearing its throat. Stephen's face went white. Maddie's mouth made a small O, which is funny because she's always liked to play surprised. Outside, the fog spilled over the grass, silver in the streetlight. A figure, tall, thin, impossibly still, stepped through my garden like a rumor made flesh. Another pressed a hand against the window and left a glowing print that faded like frost. I smiled, slow and clean, and opened my front door to wait on the threshold. Because sometimes a woman doesn't just catch you. Sometimes she stages your haunting and writes the final line herself. I don't believe in perfect timing, but I do believe in generous coincidences. The pantry door eased open as if the house had taken a breath. The whisper from the speakers rose into a chorus of faraway static, a cosmic lullaby gone wrong. Stephen dropped the wine glass. It shattered into a galaxy underfoot. "Did you hear that?" he said, voice papery. Maddie swallowed. "Old houses creak. Our house was built into a 1-2, he whispered, because panic knows calendars." Then the attic hatch sagged an inch as if a weight pressed on it from above. The LED visitor glided down the hall, casting a pale sweep of light across the family photos. Our wedding, my daughter's graduation, that one Thanksgiving where the turkey looked like it was flexing. The actor was Art, tall, spare, deliberate. He paused by the closet. The door rattled like a teeth chatter. Stephen yelped. Maddie clutched his arm. "Who's there?" Stephen called, like that line has ever helped anyone. A second figure drifted across the window outside, silhouette long and jointless. The fog curled against the siding, licked the threshold. The house hummed lower, a sound in the bones. I've heard that same note during cardiac alarms on hospital shows. It's the music of "oh no, okay, this isn't funny," Maddie announced to the emptiness, which answered with a soft triple knock from inside the bedroom, the very rhythm I'd once used to ask Stephen if he wanted tea. Knock, knock, knock. Polite, insistent, unmistakable. They bolted. The door burst wide like a confession, and there they were, Stephen in boxer briefs, Maddie in my robe, as if the one thing she couldn't take from me was a sense of irony, sprinting barefoot through a curtain of fog onto the front lawn. Their faces were wild, pupils blown. They were prey learning the shape of the sky. "Evening," I said, a hostess at her most gracious. "You to look lightly marinated." Maddie froze. Stephen skidded, caught himself, gave me a smile that belonged on a mugshot. Behind them, the alien raised one hand in a slow, pulsing benediction, then professional to the end melted backward into the fog as the whispers faded. "I can explain," Stephen blurted, "because men who say that never can." "Please don't," I said. I brought visual aids. I lifted the manila folder labeled inventory and slipped a photo free. Stephen and Maddie, tangled in the frame of my kitchen, his mouth at her neck, her fingers digging into his shoulder like she wanted to climb him. Their eyes found the picture, then each other, then the ground. I set the photo on the welcome mat. Another, and another, a breadcrumb trail of their own appetite. Maddie opened her mouth, closed it. Lauren, it's not what the pictures show. I cocked my head. Because the pictures are having a truth party and everyone's invited. Stephen's voice shook. It just happened. Daily? On Tuesdays? On my counters? I kept my tone light. Hostess with a dessert cart. Listen, darling. I'm not here for your plot. I'm here for the finale. I stepped aside. Out. Both of you. Where are we supposed to go? Maddie actually had the gall to ask, wearing my robe like a trophy tent. You're both adults, I said. Invent fire. Discover shelter. Stephen tried a different angle, the one that worked on me in the early days. Contrition arranged like flowers. Lauren, please. I messed up. I know. But we can talk. We will talk, I said. In court. I'd already filed the preliminary papers that morning because anger makes me efficient. For now, gather what's yours. He cast a desperate look over his shoulder toward the doorway. Can I close? Of course, I said sweetly. They're out back. He blinked. What? I guided them down the side path to the yard where the steel barrel waited like a metal sermon. On its lip, I'd balanced a neat stack, his favorite shirts, the cuffed chinos, the jacket he wore on our first anniversary. Also the cheap cologne I discovered under the sink. Cologne for hiding sins smells like disinfectant and oranges, and 3 pairs of socks that had more holes than loyalty. A tidy pyramid of his everyday life. Stephen inhaled. Lauren, don't, it's just cloth, I said, striking the long match. The head blazed. I touched it to the corner of a sleeve, and the fabric curled into orange and black, hungry and beautiful. It's ceremonial, really. My therapist says symbolic ritual helps closure. I say it helps with the laundry. Flames climbed, licking at memories, turning them into smoke that didn't even smell like us. Maddie took a step back, hands clamped to the robe, eyes reflecting the fire like she'd seen a saint. Or a mirror. You can keep the suitcase under my bed, I said to her. I hear it's a good listener. She flinched. You knew? I knew the moment I found your white hair in my comb, I said. Only my sister would shed entitlement so efficiently. Stephen looked wrecked. His face does not do well with collapse. It's built for charming host, not haunted house. I'm sorry, he said to the fire, to me, perhaps to the part of himself that wanted to be better and got distracted by someone in a borrowed robe. I'm sure you are, I said. You'll be more sorry when I cancel the secondary credit card and the gym membership and the streaming services you love but can never remember the passwords to because I do that. I always did that. He tried to take my hand. I stepped away. Touch should belong to people who don't treat you like a timeshare. Maddie rallied, because she always has an angle. Lauren, we're family, she said. We can work through this. Family? I laughed, not kindly. Family doesn't use the spare key. Family doesn't drink the good wine and call it a joke. Family doesn't send me anonymous texts telling me to stop loving my husband. I watched the words land on her face. The anonymous message, the one I showed Stephen and he insisted was a mistake, flickered in her eyes like a confession. Oh, was that surprised? Did you think you were the only one with a signal? She stammered, but I'd drained my compassion budget for the evening. I reached into my pocket, pulled out 2 envelopes. These are for you. Stephen opened his photocopies of the filings, a list of items he could collect later with a police escort, and a note in my handwriting. Keys due by Friday. Alarm codes change tonight. Try honesty next time. It's simpler. Maddie's envelope held a check for the exact amount she'd borrowed for a car down payment 2 years ago and never returned voided. And a typed list of the items of mine still in her possession. The camel coat, the strand of pearls from Mom, 2 first editions she never read. Return them by Sunday, I said, or I'll consider them stolen and file accordingly. Accordingly? She snapped. What are you, a judge? No, I said, gentle. I'm a woman who finally stopped negotiating with burglars. The barrel roared. A shirt's buttons popped like fat rain. I handed Stephen a metal hanger like a scepter. If you want to fish anything out, darling, do it now. He didn't. Flames are honest. They don't bargain. They shuffled away, remarkable in their smallness. That's the thing about people who build their castles in secret. They forget how little room there is when daylight arrives. I watched them turn the corner, then pulled out my phone and texted the scare me to death coordinator. Show's over. You were perfect. I'll leave a tip that makes your grandchildren's Halloween spectacular. Back inside, the house felt cleaner than bleach could manage. I opened windows, let the fog of theatrics drift out into the pine. I turned off the cameras, collected them like commas, returned the kitchen to a place where I could knead bread without hearing laughter. That wasn't meant for me. Then the doorbell rang. My son, shoulders hunched, cap backward, expression equal parts charm and nuisance. "Hey, Mom," he said. I saw the smoke from the street. "Word travels," I said, stepping aside. "If you're here for money, the ATM is closed." He laughed like we were sharing a joke. No, well, I mean, maybe just a short term. I've got this idea. It's a sure thing." I held up a hand. "Sweetheart, the only sure things are taxes and me being done bankrolling boys who call themselves men." He flinched. "A boy hides under every man when his mother says no." I softened my voice but not my stance. 4 times this year. 4. Each one short term. You never pay it back. And when I say no, you make me feel like the villain in your story." He swiped a thumb under his nose the way he did at 12. "I thought you'd understand." "You always do." "I do understand," I said. "I understand that I raised you to believe I'll fix it. That every time I rushed in with money, what you heard was that you couldn't do it yourself. I'm done telling you that lie." He dropped onto a kitchen stool and looked around like someone whose childhood wallpaper has been replaced. "So, no? No, but you can stay for dinner. I'm making something easy. Nothing that sticks to counters." He grimaced, and it hit me he hadn't come for dinner. He'd come for the ATM. He stood, frustration fizzing up. "You know what? It's fine. I'll figure it out. Don't strain yourself." "Good," I said, because growth often sounds like insult at first. "Figuring it out is how we become people." He rolled his eyes, slammed the door, texted 15 minutes later, "Sorry, bad day." I wrote back, "Love you." Still no boundary with a ribbon. That's my new hallmark. I slept alone that night and didn't hate it. The bed remembered my shape. At 3 a.m., grief patted in and sat on the end of the mattress, and I let it, because shooing it away only makes it howl. By sunrise, grief had borrowed my slippers and gone out to check the mail, which was kind. Morning brought paperwork. I met with an attorney who wears pearls like a weapon and walks as if the courthouse is an extension of her living room. We talked equitable division and spousal support like two people comparing maps. "You're not here to punish," she said. "You're here to separate." "I'm here to build a life I don't have to share with thieves," I said. She smiled, small and approving. We filed. Stephen texted 3 times apologies, detours, a quote from a song we once danced to. I left them unread. My thumb hovered over the thread like a hummingbird over a plastic flower. Then I deleted the song from my library. I like to dance to things that don't make me sick. Word worked its way through my family at the speed of gossip with gas money. My daughter called. "Mom, you okay?" "Yes." "No, better. Wiser." "I told you he wanted your money," she said. And I said, "You did, and I heard you, and I didn't listen. That's on me." But the hearing helped. Silence hummed like gratitude. Madeline texted a photo of a bag of my things on her porch. I drove over, collected the pearls and the coat and what was left of our sisterhood. She tried for a doorstep confession. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, eyes glassy in the afternoon blur. "Then why did you aim?" I asked. She flinched. I took the bag and left. Behind me, her door clicked like punctuation. It should have felt like triumph. It felt like someone had sucked the oxygen from the rooms and left my name on the lease. Everywhere I looked, Stephen's mug with the chipped rim, the chair where Maddie once sat and pretended to love the same books I did, the ghost of my own soft-heartedness in the drapes. So when the email arrived from my regional director, subject, opportunity, Senior VP, Southwest Division, I read it like a fortune cookie. They needed someone to head the big office 3 states over. A promotion, a new skyline, a different grocery store with different aisles so my body wouldn't walk to the cereal by instinct and find him instead. I said yes. I said yes before fear could throw its little tantrum. That week was a parade of boxes, labels, and the kind of purging that makes you feel lighter even as you lift. I found the engagement card Stephen wrote, "You are my North Star," performed a quick ceremony over the trash can, and kept moving. Friends came over with pizza and tape guns. We turned the living room into a temporary city of cardboard. We found under the couch the other half of that cheap earring, triumphant like a fossil. The night before the movers came, I stood in the emptying rooms and let the quiet settle. Then the doorbell rang again. When I opened it, a bouquet blocked the frame lilies, the big flirty kind that make the whole house smell like they're selling something. Behind it, a man I'd met twice at cross-office meetings, Jack Archer, head of operations in my new region, the one with forearms that suggest he once built something that didn't involve spreadsheets. He smiled from behind the flowers, sheepish and not at all sheep-like. "Welcome to the neighborhood almost," he said. "Thought I'd make the first move." "Wise," I said. "I'm not shy. I'm selective." He laughed, a sound that didn't try too hard. "Good. You'll need that where I am." I took the lilies and set them on the counter, which now held only practical objects and the promise of leaving. We talked about the office. We talked about neighborhoods, about coffee, about the way a city can feel like a person you might want to know. Jack didn't flirt so much as orbit. He kept the distance polite and the gaze direct. When he left, he shook my hand like he respects the tool. The next day, between boxes and bubble wrap, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Texan area code. Voice like the radio at midnight. "Miss Lauren," he said, "this is Alejandro from facilities in your new building. We heard you're coming to save us from ourselves." "I only save people who want to be saved," I said. "Then we're halfway done," he replied, and I liked him immediately. I like men with jobs and humor and boundaries that don't require me to be their map. I drove the first load to my new city alone, a little convoy of one. As I crossed the state line, I rolled down the window and let hot air slap me awake. The highway unwound, a ribbon toward a version of myself I'd almost forgotten I could be. For the first time in weeks, months, I felt something like appetite for my own life. At my new apartment, temporary until I found a house with light like a welcome, I unpacked the essentials: coffee grinder, good knives, clean sheets, one framed photo of my daughter and me laughing so hard we blurred. The city outside murmured a different language of sirens and sprinklers. The air tasted like cumin and diesel. A neighbor's dog introduced itself with a bass bark. I made a list on a sticky note: call locksmith, meet team, find bakery, learn street names, buy plants that don't die when looked at, don't fall for anyone until your blood pressure stabilizes. The next morning, the office doors swung wide, and my new staff clapped. It wasn't performative. It was relief wearing Joy's face. They'd been leaderless for months. They wanted a spine and a sense of humor, and I happened to carry both. I introduced myself like a promise. "I'm Lauren. I believe in clear calendars, precise kindness, and consequences that arrive on time. Let's get to work." They loved me by lunch. I loved them back by 2. Success is a flirt. It favors the bold. By Friday, 2 men had made themselves known: Jack with the forearms and the lilies, and Alejandro with the midnight voice. Jack brought me a coffee just how I like it without asking how I liked it first. Alejandro showed me where the building size when the weather breaks and how to coax the elevator into behaving like a servant, not a god. They both offered something I craved: competence that didn't ask me to shrink. I told myself I was immune. I told myself the word was never. I told myself the body is a poor historian and even worse at math. Then Jack leaned in my doorway at 5 p.m. with a question about resource allocation that turned into an invitation to a neighborhood street fair. "Come on," he said. "Let the city introduce itself properly." "I don't date colleagues," I said. He grinned. "I didn't ask you on a date. I asked you to meet a churro that will change your theology." I considered it. "Fine, but if I fall in love with the churro, don't get jealous." Alejandro texted that night: "Keycard system is haunted. Bring sage. Also best tacos 0 point for miles west." I laughed out loud in my empty apartment and realized something startling. My laugh sounded different here. Less like defense, more like possibility. At midnight, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This one very known in its way. The message: "I'm in town. Can we talk? I parked outside your building. Please, Steven." The word sat on the screen like a bug you don't want to kill because it will smear. I looked down from my balcony, and there he was leaning against a rental car, cheap courage in a paper cup, the same old jawline that had once convinced me love could be simple if I leaned hard enough. He wants to stop the divorce, I thought. He wants to promise a future that looks a lot like the past with a fresh coat of apology. He wants my attention, my patience, my ledger. And yet behind the reflexive no, a second voice whispered something annoyingly human. "Closure is a room with many doors. Choose carefully." I slipped the phone into my robe pocket and stared out over a city that doesn't know me yet. Somewhere down there, a churro awaited judgment. Somewhere else, a man with a midnight voice would be rewiring a stubborn lock and humming to himself. And just beneath my balcony, a ghost from a life I'd finally set on fire had come to ask if I kept a bucket. I took a breath that tasted like cinnamon and diesel and something else, courage, maybe. Then I stepped back inside, turned on the kettle, and decided how the night would end, because if there's one thing betrayal taught me, it's this. You don't wait for the story to happen to you. You happen to the story. Stephen looked smaller from the balcony, not shorter, not thinner, but diminished. Like someone had stolen the bold font from his name and left him lowercase. The same man who once strutted through airports beside me, brushing his hand against mine as though to remind the world I belonged to him, now stood below like a stranger waiting for permission to exist. I didn't rush down. I let the kettle hum its long sigh, poured water over a chamomile tea bag, and watched the swirl of gold bloom in my mug. Patience, my mother used to say, is the weapon of women who have already won. When I finally went downstairs, I left the cup half full, like an unspoken question. Lauren, he breathed when he saw me. His voice cracked on the second syllable, the way it used to when he told me he loved me. I didn't reply. I simply crossed my arms, the way women do when they know the floor plan of manipulation too well to get lost again. He looked around as if expecting the camera crew from Scare Me to Death to reappear. You look amazing, he said. You look like you've been haunted, I said. Fitting. He flinched, a ghost of guilt across his face. I deserve that. You deserve a full sentence, I replied. What do you want? He exhaled. To talk, to explain. Stephen, the thing about explanations, I said, is they don't resurrect trust. They're just flowers on a grave. He stepped closer. Please, just hear me out. And because curiosity is my fatal flaw, and because I wanted to see exactly how the story would crumble when exposed to daylight, I nodded toward the little calf across the street. 10 minutes. That's all I'm giving you. The calf smelled like burnt sugar and second chances. I took the booth facing the door. Old habit. He sat opposite me, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles looked like punctuation marks. I left Madeline, he said immediately. I almost laughed. You say that like it's an act of courage. You left my sister, whom you never should have touched, after losing the woman who gave you a life. He winced. It wasn't like that. Then do enlighten me, I said. Because from my angle, it was exactly like that. You wanted youth, flattery, someone who hadn't learned yet that love doesn't mean funding a man's hobbies. His eyes watered. I made a mistake. You made a series, I corrected. Mistakes are accidents. What you did required scheduling. He ran a hand through his hair, shorter now, streaked with the stress of being ordinary. Lauren, I've been miserable since you left. You were my anchor, my home. I panicked. I didn't know how to be with someone who didn't worship me. Well, I said, sipping my water, you should have chosen a religion, not a wife. He blinked, processing the punch. You can't undo what you did, I continued, but you can tell me why you're here. Because I assume it's not nostalgia. Those lilies outside weren't from you, were they? His eyes darted up, surprised. Lilies? I smiled. Exactly. You never brought flowers unless there was a sale. He swallowed. I heard you moved for work. I needed to see you, to ask if there's any chance. Of what? I interrupted. A sequel? Darling, even Netflix knows when a story's run its course. He leaned forward, desperation bleeding through his tone. Do you know how hard it is to find a normal woman these days? Unless you take her away from a man who didn't appreciate her or hold her. I nearly laughed. That's your pickup line? After cheating with my sister? He sighed. I know I sound ridiculous, but I mean it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I set my glass down, hard enough that it made him flinch. You mean I was the best thing that ever tolerated you? Silence spread between us like spilled wine. Finally, I said, Stephen, let me make something clear. I'm not angry anymore. Anger is heavy, and I have a new city to carry. But don't mistake peace for permission. You can't come back just because you're lonely. Loneliness isn't love. It's karma in quiet clothes. He lowered his head, and for a brief moment, I saw the man I fell in love with, earnest, lost, boyish in his regret. But the thing about regret is it's only beautiful to the person who caused it. Goodbye, Stephen, I said, standing. Try learning to live without an audience. He started to say my name, but I walked out before he could finish it. Names only have power if you answer. That night, I sat on my balcony again, city lights blinking below like Morse code. My phone buzzed a message from Jack. The churro is still waiting for its date. You stood it up. I smiled. It can handle rejection. It's deep fried and resilient. Then another message popped up. Alejandro, I found the source of the elevator ghost. Spoiler, it's wires, not spirits. But I could use a drink after wrestling it into submission. 2 invitations, 2 men who, so far, hadn't lied to me. Progress. I decided on neither. Instead, I turned my phone face down, poured myself a glass of red, and wrote in my journal something I hadn't done since before Stephen. It started as a list of goals but ended as a letter to myself. You are not hard to love. You just refuse to be loved cheaply. You are not too much. You are simply with someone too small. You have nothing to prove, except that you can still surprise yourself. The next morning, I woke with the kind of energy that feels like rebellion. At work, I wore red, not a muted business red, but the kind that announces a woman who doesn't need permission to take up space. Jack noticed first. You look dangerous, he said. Only if crossed, I replied. He laughed, leaning against my office door. There's a street fair tonight. No dates, no churros, just a walk. You've earned it. I looked at him, the way his shirt sleeves were rolled, the ease in his stance, the unhurried confidence that doesn't need to perform. Fine, I said, but if you bore me, I'm filing a workplace complaint. Deal. That evening, the air smelled like roasted corn and possibility. The fair was alive, kids running with balloons, street musicians testing old guitars, lovers arguing softly about nothing important. Jack bought me lemonade and didn't touch my hand. I noticed that the absence of assumption. You know, he said as we passed a booth selling candles shaped like cactuses, I read somewhere that people who've been betrayed either build walls or gates. And which do you think I am? I asked. He grinned. A woman who builds walls, then installs a door with her own key. I laughed, a real laugh, not the brittle one that lives in corporate corridors. You're not wrong. We talked until the streetlights flickered awake. He told me about losing his wife to cancer 5 years ago and how grief taught him that silence doesn't always mean peace. I told him about betrayal and fire and ghosts that wear familiar faces. He didn't flinch, didn't pity me, didn't try to fix it. He just listened. When he walked me to my car, he said, for what it's worth, whoever hurt you made a mistake that'll echo in their ribs forever. Good, I said. I hope every heartbeat stings. He smiled. And whoever gets you next better come with armor and flowers. I didn't answer. I just started the car, waved, and watched him in the rearview mirror as I drove off, a man who didn't chase, didn't plead, didn't perform. A rare breed. That night, I dreamed of Stephen again, standing in our old kitchen, asking me where the salt was, as if we'd never burned down everything worth seasoning. When I woke, the taste of smoke was gone. Days turned into weeks. Work thrived under my lead. Alejandro brought me plants that didn't die when looked at. Office oxygen, he called them. Jack sent me playlists, each one themed around something clever. Recovery Road, women who scare me in a good way, songs for red dresses. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd thrown out the pair. Then, one Tuesday morning, my assistant buzzed in, pale-faced. Lauren, there's a man in the lobby asking for you. Says he's your husband. Ex-husband, I corrected silently. Tell him I'm in a meeting. She hesitated. He says he won't leave. Of course he wouldn't. I walked to the glass railing overlooking the lobby. Below, Stephen stood, suit crisp, eyes rehearsed. In his hands, a bouquet. Not lilies this time. Daisies, my favorite. The audacity of memory. I could have turned away. I could have called security. But the truth is, closure has a smell, sometimes floral, sometimes like gasoline, and I wanted to know which one today would be. I squared my shoulders, pressed the elevator button, and went down to meet my ghost one last time. Because if he thought he could reclaim me with daisies, he was about to learn that the woman he left behind no longer accepts flowers. She plants them herself. When the elevator doors opened, I walked out slowly, heels clicking like a metronome of control. The lobby went quiet, curious eyes darting up from laptops and lattes. I didn't rush to him. I never rush anymore. I make people come to me. Stephen. My voice was steady, almost polite. That's the tone that frightens men the most, not rage, not tears, but calm. He turned, clutching the bouquet like a peace treaty that hadn't been signed. Lauren, he said softly, you look incredible. Flattery is just a band-aid for a bullet wound, I replied. Let's skip the small talk. Why are you here? He smiled, that same rehearsed charm that used to melt me. I just wanted to see you. To talk, really talk this time. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I'm sure you have, I said, glancing at the daisies. Did the florist recommend those, or was that your conscience? His hand trembled a little. You always had that sharp tongue. God, I missed it. Then you must have hated peace, I said, because my silence was the best gift I ever gave you. He sighed, set the flowers down on the reception desk as if surrendering. Lauren, I made a mistake leaving you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but maybe I could earn it. I smiled thinly. You couldn't earn it in installments, Stephen. You're broken currency that doesn't spend here anymore. He looked wounded, the way manipulators do when their script isn't working. I'm not asking for money, he said quickly. I'm lost without you. Lost? I leaned closer. No, darling. Lost is when you can't find your way home. You burned the house down yourself. For a moment, the charm faltered. His face hardened, as if realizing the woman in front of him wasn't the same one who used to believe his apologies. Then he played his next card. I've been sober for 3 months, he said. I blinked. You were drinking? He hesitated. After everything, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. Maddie. Don't you dare say her name, I said, low and sharp. The receptionist flinched. I didn't care. You lost the right to speak her name in front of me. And if you're trying to earn sympathy, start with someone who hasn't already paid in full. He opened his mouth, then shut it. I took that as victory. Stephen, I have a meeting in 10 minutes. So, unless this conversation ends with you signing the divorce papers, it's over. He looked at me, then really looked, and I saw it. The flicker, the calculation, the same look he gave me years ago when he first realized I could make his life easier. There it was, the truth behind the flowers. This isn't about love, is it? I asked. He stammered. What? Of course no, I said, cutting him off. You're broke. That's why you're here. The silence was an admission. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to draw blood. You must be desperate if you came all this way hoping nostalgia could write a check. He stepped forward, hands up, voice desperate. Lauren, I lost a contract. I just need some time to get back on my feet. I wouldn't ask if. Oh, but you would, I said. You always would. You're a professional in the art of asking. You've never met a woman you couldn't invoice. A few employees nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Stephen's cheeks flushed. You're humiliating me. No, Stephen, I said softly. I'm educating you. He opened his mouth, but I was already turning to the receptionist. Would you please make sure these flowers find a trash can? Preferably one that recycles bad decisions. Then I faced him one last time. You know what your problem is, Stephen? You think women are charities. We're not. We're banks that finally learned to say loan denied. I walked away without looking back. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and laughed until my ribs hurt. I wasn't laughing at him. I was laughing at me, the old me, the one who used to patch men like they were fixer-uppers and call it love. But between the laughter, something else crept in. A strange quiet, a tug. Freedom is intoxicating, yes, but it's also lonely in places where you once belonged. I thought about calling Jack, but I didn't. Instead, I opened my balcony door, let the warm city air rush in, and stared at the skyline, that jagged silhouette that looked like a lie that had learned to glitter. My phone buzzed. Alejandro, elevators behaving. I told it you're not the type of woman it can trap. I smiled, typing back. You tell all the elevators that? Only the beautiful ones that hum when they move. He had a way with words, smooth but never slick. We'd been spending more time together lately, late meetings that became coffee breaks that turned into long walks to the parking lot where neither of us wanted to leave first. He made me laugh in Spanish. He told stories about his grandmother who made tamales and called every broken appliance a stubborn man. He smelled like cedar and competence. And yet, I hesitated. My heart had been a battlefield, and I wasn't ready to rebuild just so another army could move in. Still, that night, when he asked if I wanted to join him at a small rooftop jazz bar, I said yes. The bar was nothing fancy: string lights, mismatched chairs, a trumpet that sounded like heartbreak. The air was thick with summer and saxophone. You know, Alejandro said as he poured me a glass of something golden, people think betrayal breaks you. It doesn't. It just teaches you who you were pretending not to be. I looked at him, surprised. And who did betrayal teach you that you were? He smiled sadly. Someone who gives too many second chances. Until I learned second chances are just invitations to repeat the first mistake with better excuses. I nodded slowly. So what did you do? He shrugged, stopped inviting. We clinked glasses, a small ceremony between survivors. He leaned closer. And what about you, Lauren? What did betrayal make you? I thought about it, really thought. It made me unafraid, I said finally. Not fearless fears useful, but unafraid of being alone. That's the kind of power that makes people nervous. He grinned. Then here's to making them nervous. We drank, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was auditioning for someone's affection. I was simply being. Later, when he walked me to my car, he didn't try to kiss me. He just said, "You deserve someone who builds with you, not on top of you." And that line followed me home like a song I didn't know I'd been waiting to hear. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, the kind of early that means you're either deeply committed or deeply avoiding something. My desk held an envelope. No name, no handwriting, just placed there. I opened it. Inside a single photo. Me and Alejandro on the rooftop the night before, taken from across the street. And a note, written in neat, slanted letters. "He'll hurt you too, just like I did." Some men never change. No signature. But I didn't need one. Stephen had found my life again, not to win me back, but to poison anything that might grow in the ashes he left behind. I closed my eyes. Let the fury build slow and deliberate. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. I don't cry when men betray me. I plot. And the plan forming in my head made even me smile. Because this time, it wouldn't be ghosts. This time, it would be truth. And truth, in my hands, is always terrifying. There's a particular temperature to rage when it's earned a slow, precise heat, like sugar just before it caramelizes. I didn't explode. I simmered. The photo sat on my desk under the morning light, and for a moment I let myself study it. The grainy rooftop, the slant of my head as I laughed, Alejandro's hand mid-gesture. There was affection there, but nothing indecent. Yet Stephen had framed it as a threat. Of course he had. When a man can't control you anymore, he'll try to control your reputation. I slid the photo into a folder labeled Evidence. Old habits die beautifully. Then I called Alejandro. He picked up on the second ring, his voice warm, still heavy with mourning. "Buenos dias, Jeffa. You sound like you're ready to conquer something." "Not something," I said. "Someone." He paused. "Stephen?" I exhaled. "He's been following me." I found a photo of us on my desk. Silence. Then, "Where do I find him?" That's when I knew I liked him more than I should. "Nowhere," I said. "Not yet. We're going to let him find me first." At lunch, I stopped by security, where a retired Marine named Dorsey ran the cameras like an orchestra. I asked him to pull footage from the previous night. "There," he said, pointing. The lobby camera showed Stephen entering after hours, charming the front desk intern with a practiced smile, flashing a card that wasn't his. A guest badge from our parent company. He'd conned his way in. "Want me to press charges?" Dorsey asked. "Not yet," I said. "First, let's make him talk." I spent the afternoon in a flurry of calls and meetings, pretending to be unfazed. Inside, I was scripting. Every line, every exit, every reveal. At 5 sharp, I left a note for Stephen with the lobby guard handwritten, folded neatly. "Stephen, you're right. We should talk. Meet me at the old Lakeside Inn at 8. Lauren." The inn was perfect. Abandoned for renovations, half the lights flickering, the kind of place where bad decisions echo. I didn't tell Alejandro where I was going. He'd have come armed with decency, and I needed strategy, not chivalry. The night air was humid, the sky swollen with storm. I arrived early, set my phone to record, and positioned myself at a table under the patio lights. He showed up right on time, in that same navy blazer he wore to every apology. "You came," he said. "Curiosity," I replied. "I wanted to see how low you'd go." His eyes darted to the shadows. "You're alone?" "Always when I deal with ghosts," he laughed uneasily. "Look, I didn't mean to scare you with that note. I didn't like seeing you with that guy." I leaned back. "Alejandro. His name is Alejandro. You know, it's fascinating. You cheat, you steal, you lie. But heaven forbid I have a drink with someone decent. You don't know him." "I know he doesn't need my money," I said. "That's an upgrade." He slammed his hand on the table, voice cracking. "You think you're so pure? You humiliated me, Lauren. The whole internet saw that video of me running out in my underwear." "Oh," I said, smiling. "That video? It has over 200,000 views now. You're practically an influencer. You ruined my life." "No," I said. "You did that when you mistook my kindness for weakness. I just gave you good lighting." He leaned closer, eyes glinting with something ugly. "You always have to win, don't you?" I folded my arms. "I don't have to. I just prefer to." Then I slid the printed still from the security footage across the table, him sneaking into my office, caught in high-definition guilt. He froze. See, Stephen, I said, lowering my voice, you should never pick a fight with a woman who keeps receipts. He tried for a smirk. So what now? You'll call the cops? No, I'll call HR at your new firm. They'll love this little trespassing stunt. You might even get a LinkedIn endorsement for desperation management. He swallowed. What do you want from me? Closure, I said. And silence. I pushed a single sheet toward him, a non-disclosure agreement my lawyer had drafted that morning. Sign it. You stay out of my life, and I won't ruin yours beyond what you've already managed. He looked at me, weighing defiance against fear, then scrawled his name. When he handed it back, I smiled. Good, now we're free. He muttered something under his breath and left, shoulders hunched. I sat there a while, listening to the crickets resume their gossip. The storm broke just as I got to my car. Fat drops hit the windshield like applause. The next day at work, Alejandro appeared in my doorway, holding 2 coffees and 1 raised eyebrow. You look like a woman who buried a body. Metaphorically, I said. He signed the papers. He handed me a cup. You didn't tell me you were going alone. I've gone alone my whole life, I said softly. Doesn't scare me anymore. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Then maybe it's time you let someone walk with you. Just once. That caught me off guard, not the words, but the gentleness behind them. No agenda, no performance, just offer. I smiled. Maybe. Weeks passed. Peace has its own rhythm, quiet but firm. Work soared. My team thrived. My son called to apologize, really apologize, for the first time. He'd gotten a job, a real one. You were right, Mom, he said. Figuring it out is how you become people. That line stayed with me. Maybe my teaching hadn't been wasted after all. I started gardening on my balcony, small herbs that didn't mind neglect. Alejandro came by sometimes to water them when I traveled. Jack still sent playlists, but I could tell he'd read the room. He'd stepped back gracefully. Then one Friday evening, Alejandro knocked on my door with takeout into glasses. Celebration, he said. For what? For survival. We ate, we laughed. We let the night unbutton itself slowly. At one point, he said, you know, Steven's the kind of ghost who thinks rattling chains will make you look back. Don't give him that power. I already buried him, I said. Signed, sealed, ghosted. He lifted his glass. To the woman who exorcises her own demons. To the man who knows when to pour wine instead of advice, I replied. After he left, I stood by the window, city humming below. The anger, the fear, the constant guarding, it all felt lighter, not gone, but bearable. Still, one truth hummed at the edge of everything. I wasn't sure I could love again, not fully. Betrayal rewires your heart like faulty electricity. It flickers even when the power's steady. But maybe that's all right. Maybe flickering means you're still lit. I closed my eyes and whispered to the night, half prayer, half declaration. I am not what was done to me. I am what I'd do next. And what I'd do next, I wasn't entirely sure. But I knew this much. Whatever it was, it would be mine. Peace has a way of fooling you. It wears a soft face, curls up on your couch, and convinces you that the war is over. You start watering your plants, baking again, even humming while folding laundry. You begin to trust the quiet. That's when the past knocks politely at first. It was a Sunday morning when it happened. I just poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one that says world's most tired miracle, when there came that hesitant knock on my door. 3 slow taps. My stomach knew before my eyes did. I opened the door. Madeline. Her hair was shorter now, a darker blonde that wanted to disguise itself. She looked thinner, smaller. Even guilt seemed to have lost weight on her. Hi, Laura, she said, her voice cracking on the name she no longer had the right to use. I didn't answer. I just stared. The air between us felt like a graveyard. Can I come in? She asked. I considered it. I really did. But then I thought about my robe, my kitchen counter, my comb, all the little altars she'd defiled, and said, no, you can talk from there. She blinked, embarrassed. Okay, I deserve that. Yes, I said. You do. And then some. She swallowed, eyes darting to the potted basil beside my door. You look good. New place suits you. I wasn't waiting for your approval. Lauren, please. I didn't come to fight. Good, I said. You'd lose. That stopped her. She bit her lip, then took a breath. I came to apologize. I almost laughed. You had 2 years for that. I know. Tears welled up, the practice kind. I ruined everything. I lost you. I lost Stephen. You lost me, I said sharply. Steven was never yours to lose. She nodded. You're right, I was jealous. You always had your life together. Career, confidence, everything. And when he started flirting with me, I didn't stop him. I liked feeling chosen. It made me feel like you for once. Her confession hit like a slap, not for the pain, but for its pathetic honesty. So that's your excuse? I asked. You envied me, so you climbed into my bed? She winced. I'm sorry, I really am. I just want us to be sisters again. I took a slow sip of coffee. Madeline, sisters don't crawl out of each other's shadows. They protect each other from them. You're not my sister anymore. You're a lesson. She started crying, real this time. Please, Lore, I've lost everything. I'm not asking for money, good, I interrupted. Because the charity is closed. You and Steven both drained the account. She shook her head, desperation flickering in her eyes. He's gone, you know, left town, owes people money. He's been calling me, begging for help. I told him to stop. He said you'd ruined him. I smiled faintly. Then I did something right. I thought you'd want to know, she whispered. Oh, I do, I said. Because it tells me karma's doing her job. She stepped closer. Can't we please move past this? You're happy now. You've moved on, Madeline, I said softly. You can't move past something you haven't paid for. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I handed her a small envelope I'd already prepared months ago because I knew someday she'd come, and I like to stay ready. What's this? She asked. An invoice, I said, for the therapy bills, the camera installation, the new locks, the new mattress, and a bottle of 2007 Merlot you and Steven stole and drank. Total, $3,248, plus tax. She gawked. You're joking. I never joke about accounting, I said. You wanted closure. That's the cost. Her mouth opened and closed. Then, in a trembling voice, you really hate me. No, I said. Hate is heavy. I put it down. But I do believe in interest. And in women learning what unpaid debt feels like. I closed the door gently, not slam that would have given her drama. And I don't hand drama to people who thrive on it. That night, I found myself staring at the city lights again, replaying her face in my head. Once upon a time, we'd shared secrets and dresses and dreams. I remembered braiding her hair before high school dances, how she used to say I was her hero. Somewhere along the line, hero turned into competition, and competition into betrayal. I poured myself a drink, whiskey this time, not wine. Wine is for comfort. Whiskey is for memory. My phone buzzed. Alejandro, I drove past your building. Your light's still on. You okay? Just untangling the family web. I wrote back. Need a hand? I'm good with scissors. I smiled despite myself. You'd get tangled too, I replied. Then we'd be tangled together. He sent back. It was cheesy. I loved it. The next morning, I walked into work feeling lighter. Not happy, happiness is too fragile a word, but steady. The kind of calm that comes when you realize you can survive any storm, even the ones that wear your sister's face. Alejandro was waiting at my desk, leaning against the doorframe like a challenge. I heard from Dorsey, he said. Steven's been seen downtown. He's working at some temp place apparently. You want me to? No, I said quickly. Let him rot. He's someone else's lesson now. Alejandro nodded, then smiled. Good, because I was planning to ask you to dinner, not to war. Dinner? I asked. Real dinner. No jazz bars. No takeout. Actual restaurant, linen napkins, awkward flirting included. I laughed. I'll think about it. You always think first, he teased. One day, you'll just say yes, maybe. But I'd earned the right to choose carefully. That evening, my son called again. Mom, he said, excitement buzzing through the line. Guess what? I paid off my credit card. Well, I said, smiling. It only took 30 years, but I'll allow it. He laughed. I'm serious. I'm getting my life together. And he hesitated. I met someone. I paused. Is she kind? Yes, he said quickly. She's nothing like Dad. I felt tears prick behind my eyes. Soft ones this time, pride, not pain. Good. Then you learned something I didn't at your age. Mom, he said gently, you're the reason I did. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, smiling into the quiet. For the first time in years, my life didn't feel like recovery. It felt like living. Weeks later, I said yes to that dinner. Alejandro picked a small place with candles that didn't pretend to hard. Over dessert, he said, you know, you scare me a little. Good, I said. Keeps men honest. He laughed, then grew serious. You've built a fortress around yourself, Lauren. But I think it's not to keep people out, it's to see who's willing to climb. That line caught me off guard. And are you climbing? He leaned forward, with both hands. I looked at him, really looked, and something inside me softened, just a little. Maybe love, when done right, doesn't feel like losing control. Maybe it feels like finally being safe enough to breathe. I didn't promise him anything that night, but I didn't say no either. When I got home, there was an envelope under my door. No handwriting, just a single word typed on it, final. Inside a check, $3,248, and a note, in my sister's handwriting, paid in full. I'm leaving the country. Don't worry, this ghost won't come back. I held the paper for a long time. Then I laughed quietly, deeply. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. I stepped out onto the balcony, the city humming below. Somewhere, someone was playing a guitar. Somewhere else, the wind carried the smell of rain. I raised my glass to the skyline and whispered, to the women who survived love and still dare to love again. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't haunted anymore. I was home. It's funny how life tests you right after you swear you've passed the final exam. You close the book, breathe, maybe even pour yourself a glass of victory wine, and that's when the next lesson walks in without knocking. Mine arrived on a gray Wednesday morning, the kind that smelled like rain and emails. I was halfway through my second coffee when my assistant buzzed in, her voice uncertain. Lauren, there's a man here asking for you. Says it's urgent. I frowned. What's his name? He wouldn't say. Just that you'd know him. I did what every strong woman does when the ghosts start crawling back. I straightened my blazer, applied fresh lipstick, and told her to send him in. The door opened, and there he was. Stephen, not suave, not smug, not even desperate this time. Just empty. His clothes hung off him. His hands trembled like unpaid bills. Lauren, he said quietly, you've got a talent for haunting, Stephen, I said, not rising from my chair. Most men would have run out of courage or gas money by now. He gave a weak smile. I deserve that. But please, just 5 minutes. You've had years. You're overdrawn. He sighed, shoulders sagging. I'm not here to beg. I'm here because Maddie, she's missing. That sentence landed like an uninvited guest. Missing? I repeated. She left the country, said she was starting over. I tried to find her. She sent me one last message, a photo of that check she gave you. Then nothing. No calls, no posts, nothing. I stared at him, unsure if it was another manipulation or a new kind of madness. And you think I care? His voice broke. She's my wife now. That hit me harder than I expected. My wife. 2 words, heavy with the kind of irony the universe loves too much. I leaned back, folding my arms. You married her? 6 months after you left. It was stupid, I know. You do have a pattern, I said. She changed, he whispered. She said she wanted to make things right. We tried, but she was different, restless, nervous. Then one night she packed a bag and vanished. Her passport's gone. I just thought, his voice cracked, if anyone could find her, it'd be you. For a moment, I just looked at him. This man who had broken me, burned me, and now came back expecting me to help clean up the ashes of his own fire. And here's the thing, I could have slammed the door in his face. I could have laughed, could have told him karma was hiring and his resume was impressive, but I didn't, because I knew that pain, the ache of not knowing, the hollow space where love used to live. Sit down, I said finally. He did, surprised. Tell me everything. We spent an hour piecing together the fragments of Maddie's disappearance, the hotel in Lisbon where she'd supposedly stayed, the withdrawal from her bank account in Spain, the last text, starting over, don't follow me. It sounded like a movie, but the part that chilled me most was this. She'd left behind her wedding ring and a half-written letter addressed to me. May I asked. He handed it over. The paper trembled in my hands. Lauren, if you're reading this, I've gone too far to undo what I've done. You were right, I had to pay for it, but I can't pay enough. I thought leaving would make it easier for you to forget. Maybe it's cowardice, maybe it's peace. I just wanted you to know I did love you once, and still, in some strange way. Forgive me if you can. Forget me if you must. Madeline. I folded the letter carefully, set it on my desk, and said nothing. Stephen watched me, eyes pleading. Do you think I think, I said slowly, that she's doing exactly what women do when they've run out of roads. She's building a new one. He swallowed. You're not angry? Oh, I am. I said. But anger's a coat I take off before bed. It doesn't keep me warm anymore. He looked at me for a long time. You've changed. That was the point. He nodded, stood. I'll go. I just needed to tell someone who knew her. As he reached the door, I said, Stephen? He turned. If she ever contacts you again, don't drag her back. Let her disappear if that's what she wants. Some of us only find peace when we stop being found. He hesitated, then nodded and left. When the door closed, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. I hadn't realized how heavy forgiveness could feel, not the giving, but the holding. That evening, I went to the rooftop garden at work, the one Alejandro had filled with herbs and wildflowers. The sun was melting behind the buildings, gold spilling into blue. He was there watering basil. You look like you just spoke to a ghost, he said gently. I did, I replied. Two, actually. He set the watering can down. Do you want to talk about it? No, I said. I want to stop talking about them. He nodded. Then let's talk about you. I smiled. You're persistent, only when it's worth it. We stood in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels like safety. Then he reached for my hand slowly, like asking permission, and I didn't pull away. It wasn't fireworks or violins or any of the cinematic nonsense. It was quiet, real, the kind of touch that says I see you, not your scars, not your armor, just you. Lauren, he said softly, you've spent so long teaching men lessons. Maybe it's time one of us teaches you something. And what's that? That not every man is your enemy. Some of us just want to walk beside you while you win. I laughed, shaking my head. That's a good line. It's not a line if it's true. I looked at him, at the man who had stood in the background all this time, patient and steady, and I realized something. Revenge may heal your pride, but kindness chosen carefully, earned honestly, heals your soul. Months passed. Spring turned to summer. Work flourished. My team adored me. My son came to visit with his girlfriend, a lovely woman who called me Miss Lauren until I told her to stop. The house smelled like baked bread and freedom. One night, sitting on that same balcony where I'd once planned vengeance, I opened a new notebook. On the first page I wrote, Lauren's Laws of Survival 1. If someone shows you who they are, take a screenshot. 2. Never let grief rent space it never pays. 3. Revenge is satisfying. Peace is sustainable. 4. Men who can't handle your strength were never built to hold your softness. 5. You are not hard to love. You are just not easy to fool. I closed the book, smiled, and raised a glass of wine to the moon. Alejandro stepped outside, drying his hands. Making more rules? Guidelines, I said. For women who forget they're allowed to outgrow the people who broke them. He kissed the top of my head, gentle as breath. Then the world needs your book. I looked up at him, eyes glinting. Maybe it already has it. And there, under that warm Texas sky, I realized something I wish my younger self had known. Strength isn't the absence of pain, it's the courage to write a new story after it. The ghosts were gone. The house was quiet. And for the first time, truly, finally I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living.